and so I'm HG. This is Cosmin Costinas. I thought you just introduced yourself.
Oh no, come on.
Come on. I mean, you are the executive director of ParaSite Art Space here in Hong Kong. But what did you do before?
I was the curator of BAC in Utrecht in the Netherlands.
And how did you end up in Hong Kong?
Job interview.
Job.
Why were you job hunting in Hong Kong, or were you headhunted?
Because it's a great city. Like, who wouldn't want to live here? No.
Well,
no, because it's.
I mean, the audience will probably know perhaps better than me. How would you describe ParaSite's role in the community, and maybe just give us a little history?
Well, ParaSite was founded in 1996 as an artist-run space, and it's the oldest center for contemporary art in Hong Kong, and it's one of the oldest independent art centers in East Asia even. And because of this history, and because it was really instrumental in many phases in the history of Hong Kong, I think a lot of people in the scene feel a lot of affection towards ParaSite. So it's one can actually call it the real public forum of the scene of contemporary art in Hong Kong.
As the art scene here, like the fair, is kind of growing and internationalizing, do you think that a site like ParaSite, a space like ParaSite, is also going to have to change, develop, move in other directions? Is that also why you're here, for example?
Well, I mean, I'm here because, I'm already the third director, so I think that's part of the normal life of an institution. But yeah, I mean, because when it was founded, ParaSite was very much understood to have a strong mission towards the scene of Hong Kong. As the first and only space at that time, it was, and even if it was created by a group of artists, it was understood in many ways to belong to the whole scene rather than to be a private affair. So the way in which that mission was understood at the beginning was to respond to the needs of the context and to fill in the gaps that were there at the time, and obviously the scene changing so much over the past 16 years, and more dramatically so over the past, even 1 year, but certainly in the past 3, 4, 5 years, those needs and the responsibility of ParaSite have changed in its turn as well. So in order to be relevant and in order to stay true to our mission, we need to change, because it's the Hong Kong of this year and of next year is a very different one than the one of a few years ago.
Can you be specific about the ways in which the institution is changing, in relation to? I mean, I think we all kind of have a sense of how Hong Kong is changing as being both a very important regional hub for commercial activity, but along with it, the local art community is getting an amazing amount of exposure in a way. So how is and how will ParaSite change?
Well, I mean, at the beginning, being the only institution, and that's not only to do with the situation of Hong Kong at the time and with the changes that have occurred in Hong Kong at the time, but it also has to do with also the changes of the international art world and the way in which a certain kind of connection between the different regions and the negotiation between these exchanges have changed as well. But at the beginning, I think the role of ParaSite was much more to be a kind of like ambassador of contemporary art and to be a pioneer of bringing relevant contemporary art from the international scene to Hong Kong and promoting local artists. And I think he did a marvelous job in doing that. I think like some of the better known, a whole generation of better known artists from Hong Kong have had ParaSite as an important point in their career in different ways. But now that kind of role is done by other institutions and other structures with very different means than ParaSite has, and in a way also the way in which we relate to each other from different parts of the world has very much changed, and it's not so much we I hope so past beyond this phase of exchanges and meeting each other, and ideally we're ready to build something more meaningfully together. So in this situation, ParaSite is doing less of this promotional work anymore, and it should understand itself more as a kind of like critical platform where all the things moving very, very forcefully in and out of Hong Kong can be put in perspective and can be discussed.
I know you've been involved in the discussions regarding M+, and the new sort of projects in West Kowloon. I'm wondering, as somebody, you're kind of like the independent space representative within those. So from that perspective, can you give us your impressions on how that's going, on the direction of an institution like M+, and how you contribute to that as a very different model, ostensibly?
Well, to the first question, where it's going, they have great plans. I hope they can stick to them. I hope they will be accepted, and I hope they will not change in the next 10 years or 5 years until they open. So more than that, it's difficult to say how it is going, being at this very early phase in which it is. How ParaSite can contribute? Well, I think in many ways. I mean, I think there's a lot of contributions that it has already done by fostering a contemporary art scene that and helping it to grow and mature to a point where such an institution is needed and it's relevant. It contributed more concretely with the kind of curatorial program that ParaSite had developed, and I think a lot of the people... Can you just talk about it? Like this? Oh. And I think that a lot of the people that would be working with and around M+, have come out of that curatorial course, and I think, well, an institution like that, if it really like wants to stay relevant for the scene, and it wants to really have a meaningful role in, not just for itself and not just as an institution in the international art circuit, but to have like a solid position within the city and within like processes of in the scene of contemporary art. It has to be in dialogue with institutions of different scope, ParaSite being one of them.
It's a physically small space. Is it going to stay that way, if you look toward the future? Or is its smallness its strength?
Well, its smallness is its strength, that's for sure, but we are actually planning to move to a slightly bigger space. Yes.
Can you say anything more about that?
Well, we are together with like other institutions. We are looking forward to the development of the CPS of the Central Police Station, and we would like to be one of the institutions hosted there, and we want it to happen in the right conditions for everyone. So yeah, I did say more.
I see. I was going to ask, actually, if you were interested in off-site projects, but maybe that answers that.
No, we are, and well, I think anyhow, there's a couple of years involved in this process as well until the CPS is ready. Hopefully, less than for M+. So until then, we actually plan to have a regular program of exhibitions in larger spaces in Hong Kong. So to maintain the headquarters at ParaSite where it is now, and to have the constant program of exhibitions inside, but to also have 1-2 large-scale exhibitions somewhere else in Hong Kong until we relocate to a permanent larger space.
And do you see ParaSite as primarily an exhibition vehicle, or are you rethinking curatorial practices in a larger way?
Well, I think its first. I think its primary mission is is a strategic one. So it's not even like its primary function is not even connected to its programs, whatever format they might take. Be it exhibitions or publications or talks. I think its primary mission is to be indeed a vehicle for the scene, for the region, and to be a platform. Now, how that can be better achieved, I think it's through a combination of different formats. I'm quite confident in exhibitions as very useful tools in general for achieving multiple purposes, including very critical and intellectual ones. I don't believe that we need to abandon or that there's something intrinsically conservative about the exhibition or intrinsically illiterate about. There's a louder voice. Right. So I think there is quite a lot that can be achieved with exhibitions.
I agree. But what I'm going to ask you a question that I asked Dan or brought up, which was this: someone was asking me last night whether and why there's not a Hong Kong biennial. And I just wanted, from a local or from someone who's working here now, like, as Hong Kong develops this art scene, does it need this thing called the biennial or the mega exhibition?
I hope not. Well, I think a lot of cities benefited from different forms of international exposure. I think an important reason why this fair is relevant for Hong Kong, besides the whole market that it sets in motion, is this is being a vehicle for exposure. So it totally does an important job, or like the main job that the biennial usually does for the city.
Yep.
And we already know that there's a very limited range of curatorial and intellectual territory that a biennial can actually accomplish in achieving. So we already know that it's at best a secondary effect of a biennial. So why on earth bother to do it?
I guess the only reason to do it, aside from the ones that you've already mentioned, would be, as I was asking Dan about this, because he's organizing the Carnegie International, which is just to bring new forms of exhibition making to places where the structures are already very codified or very rigid. And also scale. Generally, it's an opportunity for some curators to work at a really large scale, and then also to bring a large survey together.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with these benefits. I'm not against biennials in general as such, but I wouldn't. But also, on the other hand, I wouldn't lobby necessarily very forcefully for creating new ones, and especially one in Hong Kong. I think it's really not necessary. But otherwise, yes, I understand these benefits, limited as they are of biennials, and that there's a number of things that they can actually achieve.
In terms of ParaSite's own exhibition programming, what are your thematic interests, and what are some upcoming shows?
Well, I think what I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, that ParaSite wanted to, at the beginning of its history, had to be a lot of things in the same time, changed to a certain extent because there's a lot of other institutions, but since there aren't so many other institutions doing a constant, coherent program of exhibitions, at this level, ParaSite still has to do much more than many other institutions in other places. So the kind of exhibitions that we will be doing, the range of them is quite broad. So we'll have there's different way of approaching the program and the structure of the program. I guess the easier one would be to mention that there will be probably like around one exhibition a year with some sort of a historical interest, in the same way in which we have the current exhibition at ParaSite, that there will be exhibitions that would try to look more closely at Hong Kong in one way or another. There would be exhibitions that would try to connect what's going on in Hong Kong with phenomena and practices from other parts of the world. Maybe that's enough.
I'm interested to get your perspective as somebody who now obviously you're doing research about the local scene, but you also bring your overseas experiences. Having now spent a certain amount of time, curated a couple of exhibitions in the space, could you give us your impressions of the strengths and weaknesses of Hong Kong and the space that you've moved into? What's being done well here, and what needs to change in your estimation, based on the experience you've had since getting here?
I mean, what's being done well? No. No, well, see, that's okay. That can be like the first weakness is or that can be done better indeed to be a bit more critical with each other. So that's one thing. So I start with that because, I mean, that's a side effect of many scenes that are in its pioneering phase, where when you obviously build something together with everyone that are working in the field, and there's something definitely valid about it, and there is even something beautiful about this sense of absolute solidarity in it. But it can have the downside of inhibiting criticism and criticality to a large extent. So we have to understand that we can be solidary with each other, and we can, build something even more fruitful and interesting together if we actually are a bit more open to expressing our own opinions about what everybody's doing, and to discuss, to be able to disagree as well.
Other strengths and weaknesses about Hong Kong?
Well, a strength that is, in spite of a weakness of being a small scene, is that it's, and again, in spite of what I said earlier, that it's that a lot of criticality is missing, but still the scene is actually quite heterogeneous for its size, and there's people doing very different things, and there's people coming from different genealogies of the art world, and I think that's quite an important strength of Hong Kong. That the scene is not, a recent bubble of a number of people thinking the same and doing the same thing. That is something that grew over time, and it developed different sections, different groups, and and people doing quite different things. So it's rather than being a small bubble, it's a small embryon of a larger healthy scene where most of the organs are sort of formed in a
downsides.
Small.
What are the downsides?
The downsides. Well, I mentioned the first one, the criticality. I mean, there are the obvious ones. Of course, it's a city where you have like one of the largest art fairs in the world, and you don't have almost any other institutions. So when you have this disbalance, of course, you have the commercial side of things would be like hypertrophied, and it would be like significantly more powerful than any other understanding of art, of what art could be and what other institutions could be there.
That's actually why I was going to say this about the biennial, which is that I'm amazed by. I mean, I knew this fair was going to be busy, but I'm impressed to see so many people here looking. But I'm happy that people get to see art, and there are a lot of installations that, as people have pointed out, the scale of which really can't be realized anywhere else in Hong Kong. At the moment, anyway.
But you think that the biennial could offer a counterweight to the fair, because it would be spectacular but not commercial?
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, is it really? I mean,
we work in the industry.
Of course, it is non-commercial as such. But is it really necessarily a more ethically sound undertaking than a fair? I'm not sure about it, because if we do a successful biennial in Hong Kong, it will be like financed by probably the city and whatever private sponsors that want to enhance the status of Hong Kong as a hub, and it would as a great global city, and for this kind of like branding value to translate into real money. And at the end, I don't see how this would be like more ethically sound than a fair as such. I think if we indeed like want to create meaningful things and to operate in the field of arts in a way that is also like, you know, ethically coherent, we should think of different scales and different places. But when you enter at this level, I don't think there's a fundamental difference between a biennial or a fair. Again, ethically.
Can I ask a little bit about your own funding at the space? Having, being a unique sort of space that's obviously got history and so on, what's your sort of financial support? Yesterday we were speaking to William Lim, for example, who I think is on the board, and he said, it's one of the only places that certain types of art will ever get shown in Hong Kong, according to him. But who's supporting that? And is it a case of you needing to convince the very wealthy possible patrons in Hong Kong the value of more conceptual or ephemeral practices? Or is that not something that's part of your job description?
Well, ParaSite is funded in a combination of public and private money, so it's around 45% of the money comes from the government of Hong Kong, and around the same amount is private from Hong Kong. The vast majority of the private money comes through our yearly fundraising auction, where artists donate works that are being put on auction and acquired by the different collectors and wealthy people in Hong Kong. And the rest comes through different schemes of patrons programs that we are having. We have almost all the private money directly from individuals rather than corporations, which I think is quite important. We have quite a wide range of different individuals that are contributing rather than having like 1, 2, 3 large sponsors, which I think also offers a healthy relationship between the institution and its supporters. I would say that so far the kind of communication job of persuading or communicating our mission and our importance both to the government and to private money was more of an institutional level and more sort of and that's somehow connected to what I said before, that I think that the primary mission of ParaSite, I would even see it in a strategic sense of an agent in Hong Kong rather than exclusively through its program. So also this persuasion work has been mainly carried out at that level of trying to convince of our institutional importance and what we can do for the scene, rather than going program by program that this is important and this is aesthetically valid or whatsoever. So, and it's actually quite a luxury that we did not have to go to that level so far.
I guess the next question would just be, what's next for you? Are you looking forward to something? Is this leading to something else, or are you here for the long haul? It's a question that often gets directed at people working in Hong Kong from overseas.
Well, I definitely, doing this job is a serious engagement. That it's not just a job that you do for. First of all, it's not just a job. And the way in which ParaSite works, we have like contracts for 3 years. So I think that's quite healthy for the institution to reassess periodically the program and the vision and the kind of like work that its directors are doing. So I plan to respect my contract, and then we will see.
Then we'll have a chance to talk again.
Maybe in a biennial. It's a side program of Hong Kong Biennial or the Llama Island Biennial.
A self-hating
biennial.
Thank you. We have been chatting with Cosmin Costinas, the director of ParaSite, which is the independent local art space in Hong Kong. And that's the last of our Guerrilla talks today as well. Thank you very much, Cosmin.